Hi, my name is David Buggy. I work as part of a team called Inquiry Works together with Lucy Ellard and Malcolm Tulloch. And I would like to share with you a video of an interview we had recently at the beginning of April with PaulStephens from the PGDG business in Lincoln. So, to start off, to give some context to this, Paul is carrying out an experiment around having all of the documentation ready before an engine goes on to test. He's interested, and we are working with a group of people that are trying to improve the customer witness test at Lincoln. And we held a workshop back at the end of 2015 on site with a large group of people involved with the testing or associated with the testing and the wider business. And Paul took on an experiment to try and change something, and this is really Paul's story. So we'll begin by listening to how Paul showed up at that workshop.
I went. There's two answers to this. One is because I was supposed to, but I was genuinely interested at looking at a different approach because I've worked for the company for 17 years and I've been dealing specifically with test issues for 10. And you get certain frustrations about, we deal with very technical issues, and it's very frustrating when you can't do that technical work because paperwork's not in place, or things that we consider to be, they should just be normal, they shouldn't be happening all the time. And Adrian was new to the role as well. He's got a reputation for getting on with stuff. So I did, you go to some meetings and you think, okay, I'll turn up to this and show my face and but this was more, there was a feel with a new guy coming in, a new process, that maybe it was a good opportunity to actually make a real change.
Okay. We then went on to ask Paul about designing his experiment at the workshop, and he says some interesting things, I think, around resistance from others, but that really what he was trying to do was something relatively small within his control, and he was determined to make a difference. And
so ultimately, the experiment was to get a person to make sure all the correct paperwork was in place before test. And people were saying, well, we haven't got the resource for this, and we can't do that, and who's going to authorise that?
Was this on the day? Sorry.
Yeah, this was on the day. This was that afternoon.
yeah,
I remember saying at the time, look, everyone considers that their authority is limited in some way, but in real terms, we were talking about doing an experiment on one or two engines. And I think any department anywhere can spare people. You can get a person off ill for 2 weeks and you deal with it, you adapt. So why not use that same person for 2 weeks doing this experiment?
Yeah.
And ban them from being ill.
So we pushed Paul a little bit on the question of, is it really that simple just to take ownership for change? And I think it was interesting that for him, he saw the need for change, not in terms of changing the headquarters or changing another department, but he framed it as something that was within his control. So he wasn't interested in making a huge impact, changing many different parts of the organization. He really saw the change as something that he could take ownership for within his area. And he felt that the framework of using an experiment where you do a quick design on something you might try, and then you pay attention and learn from trying it and experimenting with it, helpful to get started. So there wasn't a long period of data collection and analysis before anything could be done. The approach we take, I guess, in Inquiry Works is to use experiments to support change, and he references that in this segment.
manager has that authority to do things within the people they've got. And for doing an experiment, it's not a huge commitment.
Yeah. So when we were talking to Paul, and more generally with the people we've worked with at Lincoln, and the experiments that have been designed there, they tended to be experiments around process and systems, rather than experiments around changing how people are working together, how they're meeting, the types of conversations that they're having. And we have always felt that that's an important element of the work that we do. It's I feel like it might be the how as well as the what that goes on within the organisation. So we pushed Paul a little bit on why was it that there was so much focus on process and systems, and Paul spoke a little bit about there's a lot of managers in the room, and interesting what he said about what tends to happen in the organisation the higher up you go in the hierarchy. So let's take a listen.
I'm also aware that when I was going through the system, you need to get a job done, and I came through apprenticeship, so quite often I would go and speak to my mate who's an apprentice in another department and say, oh, I need to get my hands on this part, how do I do that? And so that's more using relationships than processes. But I think as you get further up the chain, it's like, well, no, this is a process, let's follow this.
Right.
Don't get in trouble.
Yeah. So we were interested in how Paul got on when he actually tried to implement the experiment. And what stood out for me was he spoke about engaging with other departments, but not sending around emails or sending around draft documents for review. The nature of the engagement was he went out and met with people, and he met with other departments, and he got them in a room together. And they discussed it, and he was open to bringing their ideas into the design. So there was a degree of openness and a way that Paul engaged with others that I think was important in how this change occurred. And then Lucy asked a brilliant question, and kind of said, "What give us a bit more detail about what really went on, what enabled the change to happen." And then Paul spoke about Adrian Toyn's leadership being important.
We had several meetings along the way with all the right people, so the test engineers, and they were also pessimistic. I think perhaps they've seen different initiatives in the past that have fallen over.
Right. And these meetings were to kind of introduce this system and explain it, and
so it started off with our own department contributing to what we thought needed to be in there.
Right.
Then the first draft went out. What else needs to go in there?
Okay.
And obviously from the other side of the fence, there was quite a bit of extra stuff that needed to go in.
Okay. So actually, kind of in the design of the system, you got the other departments to feed in their ideas and needs or suggestions.
Yeah, there were several different half-finished checklists in existence, and
right.
Well, how do you know what needs to go on test? And so pulled all those bits of paperwork together and spoke to people. But then it kept having meetings saying, okay, here's the next draft. What do you think of this?
Right. And was it easy to have those? Were other departments open, receptive, say, oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Come, we'll find time to meet and.
Yeah, they were. I think we have, like I say, we have different initiatives, and this one just seemed to have a little bit more drive about it.
Right.
So people were buying into it.
Why do you think there was more drive? What made?
Quite probably Adrian being new to it, and I don't know him especially well, but I think he's got he has a reputation for this, so he encouraged his engineers to go along to this.
So did you feel like, maybe even though it was you and your department, your team that were going to ask him for these meetings, Adrian was somehow in the background supporting this type of thing, and that helped? Certainly
from the attendance we got at these meetings, then I think he must have been driving it. I'm not aware of it personally, but certainly we've had a better attendance for this than we have for anything else.
So we got to the point to ask Paul, so what was it like when the change was implemented? And he told us the story. They picked the first engine that would be handled in this new way. What happened in the end was the engine went on to test without being fully documented in the way it was intended. And it's a brilliant story, and it's so common, I think, in the nature of change, that the system that exists will resist the change, and I think that's what was experienced, and everybody within that system is doing what they think is the right thing, and made decisions at that time that they felt were the right decisions.
One of the engineers said, right, so you're telling me the next SGT 400 that we put on test, if they haven't put the combustion flow figures on, you're just going to tell them, no, we're not having that engine. I said, yeah, that's exactly what we're saying. And everyone bought into it at that point. And that was quite a good feeling, being able to say, right, we're doing this. This is a line in the ground. You shall not pass. And then I went on holiday for a week, and I came back, and they had taken the engine without getting all the right paperwork in place, which was terrible, really, really terrible. It's a really good holiday, you know. But after having said to the test engineers, right, I'm going to back you on this, for it then not to happen, for those guys must have felt like an enormous letdown. And very much, oh, here we go again.
And did they say that to you, or did you speak to them about it when you got back?
They didn't say that to me, but I put an email out to all the test engineers and the people involved in this project. I said, look, we've let the test engineers down. I'm sure I can find a copy of this email. We've let them down, we've let ourselves down. We said we were doing this. Everyone knows this is a good thing that we're trying to do, and it can only help us. So why haven't we done it? Well, we're going to be under pressure for a few engines, but if we really want this to happen on a regular basis, we need to make it happen. And this must happen on the next engine. Let's do it again and do it right.
So what happened next is definitely best explained by Paul.
And to be fair, everyone bought into it. And the test guy said, right, they gave me the next gas turbine and said, right, okay, we're doing this and we will support it. And they did. And it was, you could see people going, wow, this actually happened. Which was great. And then indeed we did have to look at some things on test. And I said to my engineers, was all the paperwork there? Yeah, I found it straight away. So it doesn't necessarily mean that an engine on test won't have some issues, but it means you don't have downtime doing work that should have been done up front.
Alright. So that's essentially the new way of doing things now, is it?
Yeah.
So we were interested towards the end of the interview with Paul to just ask him what did he learn about the nature of change in organisations based on his experience, and if he reflects back on specifically this exercise that he had been involved in, and he spoke about the nature of the frame we have used to support change. So we are not coming with a request to collect lots of data and do a lot of analysis before we try and change things. Actually, what we are advocating for in Inquiry Works is to change something very quickly, but very deliberately, and pay attention to what then happens in the organisation. And when the change results in a positive impact, to amplify it, and when it doesn't, to remove it. It's quite a different approach to the traditional approach. And Paul talks about that way of approaching things and trying things and seeing what happens as being fundamental to what helped change the process in this case. So let's take a listen.
Because the normal way of doing things is, okay, this is wrong. How do we fix it? And what typically happens here is you have to provide lots of data
Yeah.
to prove how many days of downtime you're going to save. And for something like this, that's very difficult to do because it's just been something that's accepted. And so that would have been difficult to quantify, and I would have had to get someone on that for a long time to pull that data in, and you'd find out that the logbooks didn't necessarily tally, and it would have been an awful mess. But this gave the authority to say, okay, everyone in their head can see this can only help things. We don't know by how much, we can't quantify it, but let's just do it and find out. And that was really refreshing, that you could just say, yeah, let's do it, let's give it a go.
So, Paul spoke about the nature of the experiments and the frameworks we had introduced as helpful in terms of making the change. But we felt that probably wasn't the whole story, and there were elements about Paul and this story that went beyond simply the fact that we used an experiments methodology. And he spoke about, again, I think really importantly, leadership from Adrian Toyne at the top of the organisation. And that's not passive approval of there are change activities, but Adrian really being involved himself in these activities, investing his time and energy in and interest in what was going on, and having passion for change provided the leadership I think that Paul talks about, combined with, I think, at the more working level in the organisation, people with energy and passion to really make a difference. And Lucy again asked a great question, which was around what is it about Paul himself that was important in this case. And I think it's clear from at least our experience that Paul himself played a big part in this change. And he spoke about his willingness, I think, to not accept the status quo and not accept the idea that this is the way all things have always been done, and be prepared to disrupt the system as it is. And although that sounds like a fairly straightforward thing to do, what we have noticed is that that is a very difficult thing for people to do.
It's from the top end and the bottom end have really contributed to it. So Adrian coming in and being very open-minded about, okay, we need to make this better.
Yeah.
Don't necessarily fully understand the process myself yet, but how can we make it better?
Yeah.
And just that open mind at the top, that's what kicks everything off and gets the ball rolling.
Yeah.
And then picking the right guy to do the job. Like I say, he's an intern, and I think many people would say, well, has he got the authority to do this? But he's a confident young man, and he's really cracked on. And also because he was new as well, he perhaps wasn't tarnished by, oh, this is how we always do it. That's one of the most annoying things I hear, is this is how we always do it. And he just came in fresh and said, no, this is... So he was also naturally aligned to the appreciative inquiry, I guess, because he hadn't had his opinion skewed by what's gone on for years and years. So open mind at the top, and a lot of drive from the guy doing the work. I'll let him get on with it.
I think I've heard a lot about, Adrian and Jan, is it?
That's right.
The people surrounding that. But I suppose, in conscious of time, but I'm interested in you. What in reflection from going through the process, both on the day and then following it through and doing the experiment, what do you think it took from you? What made your experience and what you did different?
It's something that I don't think is special at all, but when we talk about creating a paradigm shift and that sort of thing, to me a lot of that should be common sense, almost. So that's the first thing. Everyone knows this is wrong, and just being able to say to people, no, come on, let's not just accept this over and over again. And the other is when you're faced with that pessimism of just going, no, let's do it. And just be a bit open-minded about it. So I don't consider that to be anything magical at all, but just, let's give it a go. And I'm not sure how many people have that.
Yeah.
So that's it. So that's the end of the video. I think there were some themes in there that were really valuable. And I think Paul has done a really great job. And he's obviously been supported by Adrian. So I would just summarize some of the themes around leadership, ownership, engagement, passion, disruption, and drive as being central to what enabled change to happen in this case. And there's probably things and elements of this story that we can use, within Siemens PLC in the UK, within PS and PG business units, that would inform us how we would, deliver change and in other areas as well. So I think a great story, and I'm really appreciative of Paul and Adrian for the work that they've done. So that's it from David and Lucy and Malcolm, the Inquiry Works team. Thanks for listening. Bye.